I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today I'm comparing two of my favourite family cars. When a friend with a couple of kids and a budget of 40 to 50 grand approaches me looking for something that'll fit in with the school run, transporting a family's worth of stuff and the occasional road trip holiday, more often than not I'll recommend they look at a Subaru Outback or a Volkswagen Golf Alltrack. Both of these cars are excellent value, they look smart, and they're a brilliant alternative to the mainstream SUV that you might have been considering. Because they're essentially raised station wagons, they offer you better visibility, better driving dynamics, and to be honest, they're just cooler than an SUV. And that's why I think that they're really worthy considerations if you need something that offers you lots of practicality, but also all-wheel drive, which both of these cars have, for the occasional gravel track or icy road. You might be wondering why I'm not pitting the Outback against Volkswagen's larger Passat Alltrack. Well, there are a couple of good reasons why the Golf is actually the more square competitor. The first is price. The Passat Alltrack is quite a bit more expensive than these cars at over 50 grand, whereas the Golf, equivalently optioned like the Outback, comes out around the same price, about $45,000 for this pair of diesels. The second reason is actually a practicality basis, because even though it's a bit smaller than the Subaru, this Golf actually has the biggest boot by far of the pair. So with that out of the way, let's jump in and find out which of these raised wagons makes for the best family car. Here in the Alltrack, the similarities to the underlying Volkswagen Golf are obvious. This interior is conservative to look at, but there's a real feeling of quality there, and almost all of the materials used in here feel really expensive. The steering wheel and the gear shift are covered in soft and creamy leather. The dash tops and door tops are also nice and soft, and you have to look quite far to find hard materials that scratch, but down here where leg rests is one of them. This particular Alltrack is a premium model, and it means it gets these heated leather seats, which are really soft and comfortable. However, they do have manual adjustment as standard. You can option up electric adjustment with 3-position memory for the driver, as well as a panoramic sunroof and some other nice stuff through the sports luxury package, but this is how it comes as standard. What's also standard is this navigation screen, which is the basic Golf screen. It's 8-inch, nice and crisp, really fully featured apart from DAB digital radio, but the standard speakers sound really great. And this Alltrack has also got the optional active info display, which is a 12-inch digital gauge cluster ahead of the driver, which lets you put a map and other data right in front of you. It looks great, makes the car feel really upmarket. Storage and practicality is par for the course for a Golf, because the Alltrack interior really isn't different to a Golf that sits underneath it. So that means 2 medium-sized cup holders, a decent deep tray ahead of the shifter with 1 USB port, and felt-lined door bins. Hop into the Outback and first impressions are pretty good. This is a simple, functional, well laid out interior. You sit in these large and relatively soft leather seats that also score heating. I found them pretty comfortable. They've got good adjustability, the driver gets 2 memory positions as well, but the seats are actually mounted quite high to give you the impression that you're sitting a little bit higher than the rest of the traffic on the road, which lots of people will like. You get a 7-inch touchscreen that runs Subaru's Starlink Infotainment System, and it's pretty much the Toyota navigation system, so if you're familiar with that, it works almost the same way. That does mean that, like in Toyotas, you're not able to tap in destinations on the move. However, you are able to do it via the Subaru's really impressive voice command system. However, the stereo, while crisp, could use a little bit more bassy punch. And this is also a nice and practical interior. So you get a really big cubby ahead of the shifter there, which has a USB port. You get a nice deep central bin here that I was able to fit our big camera into, which is great. 2 really nice big cup holders and decent sized door bins as well. Here in the back, the Alltrack gets all the benefits of a standard Golf station wagon, which means that it is fairly roomy back here. First thing is that the seats themselves are actually quite comfortable, quite supportive, so on a long drive, kids will be fine back here. However, fitting 3 people in is something of a challenge, because this car's all-wheel drive system really eats into this floor space here, so getting a third person will mean that they have to share foot space with the outer 2. But for 2 adults, there's more than enough room. So I've got good headroom here, good leg room, and even good toe room sitting behind myself. I've got a flip down armrest with 2 adjustable cup holders. And like on every Golf, there are air vents in the back here, plus flock-lined door bins. By contrast, the first thing you'll notice about the Subaru is just how wide these back doors open, which means that this is the easier car to fit a child seat in. It's also the bigger car in the back row, unsurprisingly, because it's quite a bit larger outside. It's a bit easier to fit 3 people because the floor hump isn't as high in the Subaru, but it's still there. But for me at 6 foot, you can see that I've got good headroom, even better leg room, and about the same toe room sitting behind myself here. But the seats can do a couple of clever things. The first thing that they can do is they can actually recline, actually quite generously, so it'd be easier to nod off on a road trip back here. You do get a fold down armrest with 2 cup holders as well, plus there are air vents just like the Golf, plus bottle holders in the doors. As I alluded to at the start of this comparison, the Golf is actually the practicality star out of these two because it just gets an enormous boot. It is behind a manual tailgate though. Once that's open, you'll find 605 litres of space, which is just enormous for a car that's nice and compact actually on the outside like this one. And as usual, Volkswagen have packaged this boot brilliantly. So there are 2 large bins either side of this nice flat floor. There's a 12-volt socket, there's shopping bag hooks, clear tie-down points, and also grab handles to lower those back seats, which gives you over 1,600 litres of space. So apart from this manual gate, it's pretty close to full marks, the Golf Alltrack. The Outback does have an electric tailgate as part of the premium trim, and behind that you'll find that the boot is a good size, although it is a little bit smaller, so it's 512 litres. It's nice and easy to slide suitcases in and out of, however. Plus it's a nice full-featured boot, so you do have a couple of shopping bag hooks. There are sort of some little spaces either side of the boot, although they're not full bins like you get in the Volkswagen, but there are quick release tabs here to lower those back seats flat as well. And once you've done that, this becomes the larger load lugger with the back seats down. There's over 1,800 litres of space here in the Subaru Outback. Out of this pair, it's the Volkswagen that feels smaller, sportier, and more fun. No real surprise there, this is actually a fair bit smaller on the road than the Outback, and as such you feel less like you're driving a big barge and more like you're driving an enlarged version of a Golf hatch, which is a very fun car to drive. And that starts with the handling, which is just really small car-like. So the Alltrack steering is really nice, it's accurate in normal mode, and then you can add a good amount of weight to it by choosing the sport mode. And it does actually reward you for punting it down a back road at pace. And you're not going to get that kind of reward from the Outback, which always feels like quite a big car. Now, this Alltrack is the one that's powered by a new diesel for this model. So this is a 2-litre turbo diesel producing 135 kilowatts of power and 380 Newton meters of torque. So about 20% more power, about 10% more torque than the Subaru. And you do feel that it's a fair bit faster. So actually the Golf comes into 100 kilometers per hour from nothing, 2 seconds faster than the Subaru Outback. And as such, this feels like the faster and more grunty car out there on the road. However, it's a fairly gruff diesel, and in fact, the diesel isn't my recommendation if you're considering buying a Golf Alltrack. And that's because unlike the Subaru, which has a fairly average 4-cylinder naturally aspirated petrol, the Golf Alltrack's petrol is actually really good. So you can get it with a 132 kilowatt, 320 Newton meter, 2-litre turbo petrol. So the outputs aren't far off the diesel. The fuel consumption isn't that far off the diesel either. We recorded 6.7 litres per 100 kilometres in our combined loop with this diesel. The petrol's not much worse, to be honest. And the petrol is a lot quieter. So as I say, this diesel is a bit gruff. The petrol is near silent at town speeds and sounds better when you wind it out anyway. Plus, it's cheaper. So I'd recommend going for the Alltrack petrol. Now, one area that the Subaru is clearly better in terms of the driving experience is in the ride. And that's because the Subaru is just really plush, which suits this kind of all-wheel drive family hauler better. The Golf's ride is actually pretty firm, even on these 17-inch wheels, and it would be even more firm on the optional 18-inch wheels that do look great and a lot of people go for. So keep that in mind. And that really explains the difference between these two cars as well. The Outback is really cushy, big, comfortable, big family car, quite traditional. The Golf Alltrack is what you buy if you actually still want to keep driving something pretty sporty. You might already own a Golf GTI or something like that, but you've had kids, you need to buy a family car, but you don't want to lose that sense of fun. Out of this pair, the Outback is the larger car, and it feels that way from behind the wheel. The Subaru really feels tuned for comfort. This is a big plush touring wagon, and it's actually a little bit more supple and a little bit more comfortable than the Golf. So under the bonnet here, we've got the 2-litre turbo diesel, which produces 110 kilowatts of power and 350 Newton meters of torque. Now in the past, I've actually only driven petrol Outbacks, but the diesel has really changed my mind, and I actually think it's worth the money over the 2.5-litre aspirated petrol. It's a nice, relaxed powertrain. It's not fast. The Outback diesel is 2 seconds slower to 100 than the Golf, coming in at a 10-second sprint. However, the engine really suits the car. There's heaps of torque, so around town it's easily got enough grunt. And actually, the diesel is a better match to the CVT automatic transmission than either of the two petrols are. It feels really relaxed. The CVT, you can barely even notice that it's a CVT. It actually works really, really well. It's really miserly on fuel as well, the Outback diesel. On our combined test route, it actually came back with a figure of 6.2 litres per 100 kilometres, which was half a litre better than the Golf, which was actually a real surprise. The ride quality is really nice around town. You do feel some larger imperfections coming through to the cabin, but by and large, the Outback soaks up imperfections well, and it's an easy, relaxed car to tour in out on the open road. Now, I was very critical of the steering feel in the petrol Outback, but the diesel actually manages to mostly correct this, mostly because the engine is quite a lot heavier than the petrol version. So there's an extra 100 kilos or a bit more over the front axle, and that's added some weight into the steering, which makes this car feel better to drive. But you're never gonna think that the Outback is a sporty car. It's really not. It's a tourer. It doesn't reward you for tossing it into corners too hard. Instead, it's just a car that you drive calmly and smoothly, and it's satisfying in that way. The all-wheel drive system in the Outback is beefed up on what you get in the Golf, so it's actually a permanent all-wheel drive system, which is nice and secure on really slippery roads, and it's good on dirt tracks as well. The extra ground clearance of the Outback means that this is the more capable off-road of the pair as well. However, the downsides are this engine is more trucky than what you get in the Golf, so it sort of makes more rattling noises as you're driving along. It doesn't want to, as I say, it doesn't want to handle as sportily as the Golf, so the Golf will still reward you for driving it harder. The Outback won't do that. And also because it's that bit larger, it's a bit less maneuverable and a little bit less easy to park around town than the Volkswagen. Impressively, every Outback comes with Subaru's Eyesight safety system, which bundles active cruise control, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, and autonomous emergency braking. That's impressive. You do have to option up some of those technologies on the Golf Alltrack. On the surface, these two cars appear very similar. As a pair of raised all-wheel drive wagons, their concept is the same. However, the interpretation of the concept is quite different in the Outback compared to the Golf. In the Subaru, you get a sense that you're driving a big, traditional, plush family wagon. The Outback's priorities lie in offering huge amounts of space, driver and passenger comfort, and a sophisticated off-roading setup with more ground clearance and a beefier all-wheel drive system. Where the Subaru loses points is in driver engagement, with the Outback's ultimate armchair cruiser status making it a little less fun in the corners. Meanwhile, the Golf is much more of a driver's car in this comparison. From behind the wheel, you can barely tell you're driving an Alltrack, as opposed to a standard Golf wagon. That's because the ground clearance is a lot more modest. Also, the Golf's 4-motion all-wheel drive operates part-time, unlike the Subaru. The Volkswagen prioritizes real dynamic ability, an additional layer of cabin luxury, and smaller external dimensions, but that means the Alltrack is smaller in the back too, and it prefers bitumen to sand. Depending on your tastes, one of these skill sets will make more sense. If you like the aesthetic of a raised wagon, but you want a car that's fun to drive, take the Golf. On the other hand, if you just need a big, old-school wagon that's comfortable for everybody, and if ground clearance is important, the classic Outback has you covered. The good news from this test is that the family car market really does offer something for everybody.